The cable didn't announce its death. That's the thing about undersea infrastructure. It fails quietly, in the dark, and the first sign that something has gone wrong is usually a strange number on a monitoring screen. This one read 0 at 4:09 a.m. At 4:09 a.m., a network operations center outside Helsinki registered a total loss of signal on a fiber-optic trunk line running 1,173 kilometers from Hanko on the Finnish coast, south-southwest, through the Baltic to a landfall point near Rostock, Germany. The cable carried a significant portion of Finland's international data traffic, a share of NATO logistics communications that had been routed through commercial infrastructure as a cost-saving measure, and something else, something that does not appear on the public technical specifications for that cable, whose nature has not been officially disclosed. The technician logged a fault, called his supervisor, and the emergency team began narrowing the break using time domain reflectometry. The break was at kilometer 847, approximately 91 nautical miles southwest of Gotland, in Swedish economic waters, at a depth of 103 meters. By 4:47 a.m., the technician filed a preliminary report blaming anchor drag. He resumed his coffee. He was wrong, and the truth would arrive like a blade 11 hours later. Hi, you're watching the Incident Brief, where we break down what you weren't supposed to see right as it unfolds. If you want to understand the decisions that shape these moments before anyone else, subscribe now and keep listening. The vessel traffic in that corridor on that particular night was unremarkable on its face. 3 bulk carriers, a container ship, and 2 tankers had transited the fault area within a 6-hour window. Their AIS tracks the automatic identification system data that all commercial vessels are required to broadcast were logged and retrievable. Routine. But one ship did not fit. The Arctica Pioneer, a Maltese-flagged dry bulk carrier bound from Ust-Luga to Rotterdam with potash fertilizer, showed a complete AIS track except for a 19-minute gap starting at 1:43 a.m. That gap ended 2.3 nautical miles from kilometer 847. AIS gaps happen. Equipment fails. Transponders lose power. 19 minutes is not, by itself, evidence of anything. Combined with what signals intelligence later found in that corridor, the AIS gap raised uncomfortable questions. The intelligence finding arrived at NATO's Allied Maritime Command in Northwood at 3:22 p.m. 11 hours after the break, 6 hours after a Finnish naval patrol vessel had been dispatched to the fault location, and 40 minutes after a Royal Danish Navy P3, Orion had begun a passive acoustic survey of the surrounding water column. The finding was this. At 1:31 a.m., the Swedish Defense Research Agency's hydrophone array detected a submerged contact in the fault area. The timing of this detection suggests the vessel was present at that specific moment. The contact's acoustic signature was consistent, not confirmed, but consistent with a Kilo-class diesel-electric submarine operating on battery power at low speed. The contact remained in the area for about 40 minutes before vanishing below the thermocline, which absorbs sound. It wasn't detected again. Someone ran a submarine quietly over the fault, then descended beyond acoustic detection right before the cable was cut. The Arctica Pioneer had been 2.3 nautical miles away. No confirmed contact. The wait was suffocating. The gap was 19 minutes. What a Kilo-class submarine can do at 103 meters above a fiber-optic cable is not well documented in open sources. Engineers who design undersea infrastructure note that a large submerged object dragging a purpose-built cutter along the seabed can sever a trunk line in a way forensically hard to distinguish from anchor drag if the cut matches the angle of a dragging chain and the cable is cut, not crushed. The Finnish cable at kilometer 847 was severed at just such an angle. Clean cut, not crushed. At 2:15 p.m., the emergency team reached the site by submersible. Their preliminary report, sent both to the operator and confidentially to Finnish intelligence, included one detail omitted from the public summary. The cut was clean. Anchor drag leaves a characteristic deformation profile across the cable's outer sheathing. This one was immaculate, too immaculate. By 4 p.m., Allied Maritime Command faced a problem that was simultaneously tactical, legal, and political. And it needed to resolve all 3 dimensions simultaneously, which is not how problems of this kind typically resolve. The tactical dimension, A Kilo-class submarine, almost certainly Russian, had not been redetected since going below the thermocline. The Swedish array had picked up nothing. A Norwegian P-8A dispatched to the area at 1:45 p.m. had deployed sonobuoys across a projected exit corridor and heard nothing. The submarine was either still in the area, sitting silent on battery power, or it had already exited into the Baltic proper, where the acoustic environment was significantly more cluttered and the geometry of detection grew harder by the hour. If it had exited, it would have been moving toward international waters. If it reached the Danish Straits and passed into the North Sea, the forensic window, the ability to positively identify it and connect it to the cable, would functionally close. The legal dimension: Swedish economic waters. Sweden was a NATO member, but the legal framework governing the forced surfacing of a submerged foreign military submarine within a member state's economic zone was not straightforward. It required a Swedish decision, coordinated with NATO authority, executed by an asset with the right rules of engagement in the right position. The political dimension: Russia had not acknowledged any submarine activity in the area. Russia had not acknowledged the cable cut. Russia had, through its embassy in Helsinki, expressed concern about reports of a cable failure and offered technical assistance in the investigation. A statement so precisely calibrated to imply innocence while confirming awareness that the NATO intelligence community logged it as a signal in itself. Forcing a Russian submarine to surface was an act that Russia would frame as aggression. Not doing so meant watching the only physical evidence of a deliberate infrastructure attack disappear into international waters. The decision was made at 5:17 p.m. The asset was the Norwegian frigate HNoMS Roald Amundsen, which had been conducting exercise activity in the central Baltic and was now repositioned at speed to a holding point on the projected exit corridor. The commanding officer, a frigate captain whose name has not been made public, was given authority to prosecute the contact if reacquired, and to attempt to force it to the surface. He had a window. The window was defined by Swedish economic waters. Once the submarine crossed the boundary into international waters, the authorization expired. Based on the projected exit track, the window was 30 minutes. The Roald Amundsen deployed its hull-mounted sonar at 5:34 p.m. and began an active prosecution sweep. Active sonar, a direct acoustic pulse into the water column, announces itself to everything within range. It tells a submarine that it has been found, or that someone believes it has. The response of a well-trained crew to an active sonar contact is not to surface. It is to go deeper, go slower, and go quieter. The first sweep returned nothing. The window was closing, fast. The second sweep, adjusted in frequency to compensate for the thermocline, returned an ambiguous contact at 5:41 p.m. Not a clean detection. A density anomaly in the water column that could be a submarine, could be a thermal layer artifact, or could be a school of fish large enough to scatter sound in an unusual way. 7 minutes elapsed while the frigate's sonar team worked the contact. At 5:48 p.m., 12 minutes before the projected boundary crossing, the contact firmed Kilo-class acoustic profile. Low battery power, 4 knots, southwest heading. The frigate captain had his contact. He had also, at that moment, reached the point where the authorization was clear and the consequences of using it were not. The international law of the sea grants coastal states jurisdiction over foreign submarines in their economic waters, but forced surfacing exists in a legal gray zone whose edges have never been tested in a scenario involving a nuclear-armed state and a piece of infrastructure that no government has yet publicly attributed to anyone. If the submarine surfaced and its crew was found to have equipment consistent with cable-cutting operations, it was the most significant evidence of deliberate gray zone sabotage NATO had ever physically recovered. If the submarine surfaced and its crew had a different explanation, mechanical distress, navigation error, anything, the entire operation became a provocation whose political cost would land on Norway, on NATO, and on the fragile post-Iran strike stability that the alliance had spent 3 weeks carefully managing. And if the submarine did not surface, if its commanding officer decided that the risk of being caught was preferable to the certainty of what surfacing meant, the Roald Amundsen would have to decide what came next. The authorization to force surfacing did not extend to sinking. The frigate captain transmitted a standard international hailing on the submarine safety frequency. Unidentified submarine in position coordinates. You are in violation of Swedish economic zone regulations. Surface immediately and identify yourself. 11 minutes to the boundary. No response. The hailing was repeated. No response. The frigate's torpedoes were in a ready state that stopped short of active targeting, a posture that communicates seriousness without completing the firing chain. 6 minutes. At 5:54 p.m., the contact began to ascend. No one has publicly explained why the submarine surfaced. The most credible reconstruction, based on what little has leaked from the subsequent intelligence analysis, is that the submarine's commanding officer calculated that his acoustic profile had been firmly established, that his exit corridor was blocked, and that the risk of a kinetic incident in Swedish economic waters with the forensic and political exposure that would follow exceeded the risk of surfacing and accepting whatever diplomatic consequence came with it. He may also have received an order. If so, the origin of that order and its content are not known to any Western intelligence service, at least not in any form that has been shared publicly. The submarine broached at 5:57 p.m., 3 minutes before the boundary. Russian naval ensign, Kilo-class hull. Sail number obscured by what appeared to be fresh paint, a detail that was immediately photographed by the Roald Amundsen's deck crew and noted in the incident log. The Swedish Coast Guard was notified. The Swedish government was notified. NATO was notified. The Russian naval attaché in Stockholm was notified and declined to respond until the following morning. The submarine was escorted to the Swedish boundary, where it submerged and departed. Its crew was not boarded. Its equipment was not inspected. The legal framework for compelling a boarding in that specific scenario had not been pre-authorized. The 30 seconds in which the frigate captain might have improvised a justification passed without a decision. The paint on the sail number was later analyzed from the photographs. It had been applied recently within the previous 48 hours, according to the technical assessment. The underlying number was not recovered from the photographs. The Arctica Pioneer arrived in Rotterdam 2 days later. Dutch port authorities conducted a standard inspection. The crew manifested no unusual cargo. The anchor chain was examined and found to carry no residue consistent with cable contact. The vessel was released. It departed Rotterdam the following morning, bound for Oostluga. The cable repair ship reached kilometer 847 and completed the splice 11 days after the cut. The undisclosed traffic that had been running through the cable resumed. Whatever its nature, it had been rerouted through backup paths during the outage, a contingency that worked, and whose existence suggested that someone had anticipated at some level of planning that the cable might not always be there. The Finnish government, in its official public statement, attributed the cable failure to possible contact with a vessel, anchor, or seabed equipment under investigation. The investigation has not produced a public conclusion. The NATO incident report, which exists, whose existence has been confirmed by a single reference in a parliamentary question from a Norwegian opposition MP that the Defense Ministry declined to answer, specifically remains classified. The frigate captain filed his log. The photographs of the submarine's obscured sail number are in a database somewhere. The acoustic recording of a Kilo-class profile sitting above a cable at 1:31 a.m. is in a Swedish archive. None of it constitutes, in the legal sense, that would survive an international dispute proof of anything. That is the architecture of gray zone operations, and it is not accidental. The 19-minute AIS gap, the clean cut at an angle consistent with an accident, the paint over the sail number. Each element is individually deniable. Each element, in the pattern they form together, is unmistakable to anyone with access to the full picture. The full picture is distributed across Finnish, Swedish, Norwegian, and NATO intelligence holdings, ensuring no single government can present it in its entirety. That distribution is also not accidental. The Baltic carries 7 active fiber-optic cable routes connecting Nordic and Baltic NATO members to the broader European network. 4 of them pass through Swedish economic waters. Each one crosses a section of seabed that is deeper than easy inspection, shallower than easy concealment, and precisely mapped in publicly available nautical charts that anyone with a subscription and an interest can access. The Roald Amundsen returned to exercise activity after its escort was complete. The crew was debriefed under classification. The frigate captain's account of the decision he made and the decision he did not make in the 30 seconds after surfacing is not in any document that will be readable within his lifetime. He knows what he chose. He also knows what the paint on the sail number means. The cable is repaired. The submarine is somewhere in the Baltic Fleet's order of battle, with a hull number that no photograph has recovered. The next cable runs 340 kilometers to the east. It crosses Swedish economic waters at a depth of 97 meters.